The Atchafalaya Basin isn't just America's largest swamp. It's the most restless, the most unpredictable, the most alive. This is where buffalo have drowned on dry ground, where trails appear and vanish overnight, where fishermen swear they hear voices drifting through the cypress canopy, voices that belong to no one, echoing where no echo should exist. In the Atchafalaya Basin, nature doesn't wait for you to understand it. It waits for you to disappear. 6 mysteries, 6 signs that something here is waking up. Lock your door, dim the lights, adjust your headphones, because after you hear this, you'll never look at the Atchafalaya Basin the same way again. Bayou Chene, Louisiana. Bayou Chene was once a stubborn little town, a cluster of houses, docks, and fishing camps built on the edge of the Atchafalaya's restless waterways. It survived storms, floods, and shifting channels for over a century. Old photographs show children on raised porches, shrimp boats tied to crooked piers, and a church that leaned slightly east, as if bowing to the swamp that fed the town. But by the mid-1900s, Bayou Chene began to vanish. Not collapse, not rot, disappear. In the early 20th century, surveyors noted something strange. The ground beneath the town shifted in ways that didn't match normal sediment movement. Entire lots sank without warning, while others lifted slightly, as if floating on the water table. Residents woke to find their docks misaligned, front steps leaning in new directions, yards sloping toward the bayou more steeply than the day before. By the 1940s, small sections of town began to detach, pieces of land drifting slowly into the water, carrying fence posts, outhouses, sometimes entire sheds. Locals measured time not by seasons, but by what disappeared each year. Then came the flood of 1973. The Atchafalaya rose fast, stronger than anyone predicted. Water poured through the basin with such force it reshaped entire channels overnight. When the flood receded, Bayou Chene was no longer a town. Most of it was open water. The houses that survived rested on tilting stilts like relics suspended between memory and decay. But that wasn't the end, because Bayou Chene didn't simply drown, it moved. In 2007, a team studying sediment flow used sonar to scan the submerged footprint of the old town. They expected to find remains where historical maps placed them. Instead, the shapes, foundations, straight lines, rectangular outlines, collapsed rooftops, appeared nearly a mile from where they should have been. Foundations don't slide sideways through a swamp. Not intact, not in formation. Researchers assumed map error, but when they overlaid the 1956 aerial survey, the structures had already begun drifting. Even then, subtly, slowly, shifting eastward as if carried by a hidden current beneath the soil. Locals had another explanation. They said the basin takes back what sits too long, that the swamp rotates, breathes, reclaims land in patterns older than the river charts. One fisherman swore he saw the old church roof beneath the water in the late 1990s, its shape unmistakable in the tannin-dark shallows before a storm stirred the mud. But the church's known location was thousands of feet away. And then there were the sounds. In 2013, during low water, a family kayaking through a remote section claimed they heard distant hammering, rhythmic, metallic, echoing just beneath the surface. When they marked the spot on GPS and returned with a depth finder, they found submerged beams arranged in a grid, exactly where no building from Bayou Chene should have drifted. The beams were too regular, too aligned to be storm debris. Something had settled them there. Several hydrologists believe the Atchafalaya hides rafts, Massive mats of soil, roots, and sediment that behave like slow-moving islands, carrying structures without breaking them apart, drifting quietly for decades before anchoring again. But the eastern drift of Bayou Chene doesn't match known raft paths. It follows a straighter line, a more deliberate line. In 2019, during a drought that exposed parts of the basin, a researcher found wooden pilings arranged in a near-perfect rectangle, rising just inches above the waterline. The formation matched the exact dimensions of Bayou Chene's old general store, but in a location that appears on 0 historical maps. When he returned 3 months later, the pilings were gone. Not submerged, gone. Satellite imagery taken shortly after showed a faint rectangular shape drifting under the water half a mile away, like the shadow of a town refusing to stay where memory placed it. The basin didn't just swallow Bayou Chene, it redistributed it. And far deeper in the swamp, another structure was beginning to move. One that didn't return empty. The houseboats that drift back empty, Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana. In most parts of Louisiana, a missing boater means a search party, a storm, or a tragic accident. But in the Atchafalaya Basin, a stranger pattern appears in the incident logs. Not missing boaters, but returning boats, drifting back to marinas and fishing camps long after the people aboard them disappeared. The first widely reported case came in 1988. A small rental houseboat was found bumping softly against a cypress trunk near Bayou Sorrel. Inside, everything was in place. Fishing rods, lunch cooler, tackle box, ignition key still in the console. The owner's boots were neatly set by the doorway, but the man himself was gone. No sign of struggle, no torn clothing, no footprints on the muddy bank. Just a houseboat drifting quietly, as if delivered back by the swamp. Authorities listed him as drowned, though there was no evidence. Locals had a different phrase. The basin returned the boat, not the man. In the mid-90s, 2 more empty crafts were recovered miles from where they'd launched. Both had their anchors still coiled, untouched. One had the radio turned to the weather band, volume low, broadcasting nothing but static. The last log entry read, "Water's too still. Feels wrong." It was time-stamped 9 minutes before the onboard clock stopped. The most chilling case happened in 2004. A family left Butler Rose on a 26-foot houseboat. Around dusk, another boater saw their vessel drifting unusually slow, bow angled against the current. He waved. No reply. When he got closer, he saw the sliding door open, curtains moving with the wind. Inside, the dinner table was set for 3. Plates, cutlery, drinks half poured. One chair had been pushed back slightly as if someone stood up mid-conversation. The engine was still idling. The family was never found. Over the next 15 years, the pattern repeated so often that some marinas quietly stopped renting overnight vessels. The empty boats rarely showed damage. No scratches from logs, no missing gear, no indication anyone had fought to stay aboard. They just returned. Some traveled against the prevailing current, drifting upstream in ways physics didn't support. And every time, the engines were either idling or dead silent, as if someone turned them off gently. In 2016, a wildlife officer found a houseboat wedged between 2 cypress stumps deep in a no-motor zone. The interior was spotless, unusually so. Not a single drop of swamp water inside, not even on the deck, as if the boat had been carried there above the waterline. The officer backed out immediately. Later he wrote, "The boat didn't look abandoned. It looked placed." The most perplexing detail came from GPS logs. 3 recovered houseboats recorded identical anomalies, their position readings repeated in a perfect loop. A digital circle traced over itself again and again, as though the vessel was circling a point it never physically reached. When mapped, those loops formed the same radius, the same center, the same shape. A hydrologist reviewing the data noted the loops were too precise to be the result of drift. They looked like the boats were moving in a controlled path, or like the GPS was reacting to something pulling the signal into a spiral. But the real turning point came just 2 summers ago. An air tracker following a missing fisherman's boat found it lodged in tall reeds, bow pointing toward a narrow canal. Beneath the deck, the water vibrated, not from wind, not from the boat's hull, but from the canal itself. A long, slow pulse that traveled through the reeds like a warning. Minutes later, the vibration stopped, and the boat, though tied to nothing, began drifting backward, as if pushed by a current no one could see. The tracker backed away. He filed only a partial report. Since then, rangers have noted that empty houseboats tend to return from the same sectors, areas known for deep submerged trees, unstable peat layers, and sudden underwater drop-offs. Places where the basin feels less like water and more like something shifting beneath it. And one of those sectors holds a phenomenon older than any boat. A place where fog moves in patterns no storm ever taught it. Because before the boats drift home, the fog arrives first. The Atchafalaya Fog Line, Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana. Fog is normal in the basin. Fog that moves against the wind isn't. Fishermen have talked about the fog line for generations, a pale, rolling wall that forms without rain, without cold fronts, without warning. It appears most often in the deep central waterways, rising from the water in a single straight band like a curtain pulled upward by invisible hands. Older captains say you can outrun it. Younger captains say you shouldn't even try. The first official reference dates to 1964, when a highway crew on the old Morganza spillway recorded a slab-like fog mass advancing toward them from the swamp. The men described it as unnaturally tall and sharply defined, not drifting, but sliding, keeping its shape even as the wind blew perpendicular to its path. Minutes later, visibility dropped to 0. When the fog lifted, their floodlights flickered for nearly an hour. The state police blamed humidity. The crew disagreed. By the late 1980s, the fog line appeared often enough that houseboat owners knew to pull into the nearest bank when it formed. Some said the silence inside it was the worst part. Sound seemed to dissolve, swallowed before it traveled more than a few feet. Engines sputtered, radios crackled, GPS units froze on single coordinates, yet compasses spun slowly in full circles. One man, a shrimper named Duval, described the experience like this. It wasn't just fog. It was something between me and the rest of the world. In 2009, a meteorologist studying temperature inversions camped on a floating platform near Whiskey Bay. At 2:17 a.m., cameras captured a sudden vertical plume of fog rising from the water. Not spreading, not drifting, but climbing straight up as if pulled. 3 minutes later, the plume bent sharply to the left, in perfect defiance of the wind direction. The camera's microphone recorded a low fluttering sound, similar to a distant helicopter, except the air was perfectly still. The meteorologist didn't release the footage publicly, but the audio leaked online years later. Spectrogram analysis revealed a pulsing pattern, evenly spaced intervals nearly identical to tone clusters recorded in other swamps. A repeating signal buried inside the fog. But the most chilling account came from two kayakers in 2017. They were paddling near Henderson Swamp at dusk when the fog line formed across the channel ahead of them. Worried about getting lost, they held position. But the fog didn't pass. It stopped, settling across the water like a solid wall. The kayakers tried speaking to each other, but their voices sounded muffled, as if trapped in cotton. Pacing along the unseen bank, then stopping only a few yards away. One of the kayakers whispered, "Hello." The moment his voice broke the silence, the fog collapsed inward. Not melted, not drifted. Collapsed, sucked downward into the water with a sound like a single deep breath. Nothing was on the other side, just open swamp. When the kayakers paddled through the area minutes later, the water was warm, warmer than the air, warmer than the surface, as if something massive and unseen had passed through it. 3 months ago, a transportation drone mapping flood depth recorded the fog line from above. The aerial imagery revealed something ground observers couldn't see. The fog didn't move randomly. It traced a perfect arc, an arc matching the path of submerged, migrating soil layers discovered beneath the basin in 2004. The fog was following something underground. But what disturbed researchers most wasn't the movement. It was the timing. The fog always forms seconds before localized tremors, soft, pulsing vibrations that don't register as earthquakes but do register on buried water pressure monitors, as if the swamp is exhaling before something shifts below. Fishermen who've experienced it say the same phrase every time. The fog knows before we do. And deeper inside the basin, where the cypress trees crowd tighter and the water grows blacker, there's a place where these vibrations become something else, something loud enough to reach the surface. Because when the fog collapses, the noise begins.
Whiskey Bay, Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana.
Whiskey Bay is a place boaters treat with respect, not because of wildlife or storms, but because of the sound. People call it the echo, as if it were a single phenomenon, but the truth is stranger. The echo doesn't repeat your voice. It repeats something else entirely. The first reports date back to the early 1970s, when night fishermen swore they heard low booms beneath the water, faint, distant, like someone striking a steel drum deep below the mud. The sounds appeared after heavy rain, always in clusters of 3. Engineers blamed collapsing roots, gas pockets, settling earth. The explanations didn't last. In 1991, a construction crew on the elevated I-10 bridge heard a metallic clang from directly under the pilings, loud enough to vibrate the rebar. They assumed a barge had struck the supports, but River Patrol confirmed no vessel was anywhere near the bridge. The water was calm. The crew logged the event as subsurface acoustic anomaly. 15 years later, kayakers reported hearing those same booms, but this time accompanied by a deep, rhythmic thrum that felt more like vibration than sound. Their boats trembled in pulses, each spaced precisely 8 seconds apart. When they paddled toward the source, the pulses stopped instantly, leaving the swamp unnervingly silent. But not every sound vanished. In 2010, a biologist tracking sturgeon traveled along a narrow channel near Whiskey Bay. While reviewing her hydrophone recordings that night, she found a sequence of echoes, not from fish, not from movement, but from a repeating tonal pattern rising from beneath the silt. It was structured, mathematically spaced, like sonar. She checked for boats, submarines, seismic testing. Nothing matched. The frequency was too low, too deep, too controlled. The recording was sent to a state geophysicist who gave a single note in his report. If this were a natural event, it wouldn't be this precise. Then, in 2018, something new emerged. Two crawfishermen working pre-dawn lines said they heard voices, short phrases warped by water, echoing in a strange metallic timbre. Not words they recognized, not English, not exactly language at all. When they tried to follow the sound, it shifted directions. When they stopped moving, the sound stopped too. They described it less as hearing the swamp and more as the swamp hearing them. The following year, a diver from a volunteer search and rescue team entered a flooded stretch near the Whiskey Bay boat launch. Visibility was zero. But halfway through his sweep, he felt pressure in his chest. Not pain, but force, like standing too close to a massive speaker. His depth recorder spiked. His underwater mic captured a single, long, tonal sweep, rising, bending, then cutting off sharply. Minutes later, the diver surfaced in a panic. He refused to return. He later said, "It wasn't sound. It was a command." In 2022, a flood monitoring drone detected something no one expected. A perfectly symmetrical pattern of ripples forming across the surface of Whiskey Bay in 12-second intervals. Identical timing to the pulses recorded by the kayakers years earlier. But the drone's thermal camera revealed something far stranger. Each pulse rose from a small point of warmth deep beneath the mud, moving slowly north. The warm point wasn't static. It wasn't geological. It was migrating. Researchers reviewing the data privately suggested a massive pocket of trapped gas. But gas doesn't move in straight, deliberate paths, and it doesn't produce rhythmic, harmonic echoes. Locals have their own theory. The basin is hollow in places, and something beneath the peat shifts when the water level rises. Something that calls through mud and root and water using vibration instead of voice. Cutoff Canal, Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana. Deep inside the Atchafalaya, there's a narrow waterway old trappers called Cutoff Canal, a straight, unnatural-looking corridor carved decades ago for logging. On maps, it appears permanent, but on the water, people tell a different story. The canal doesn't stay where it was dug. It changes shape. It closes. It opens. It returns to places it hasn't touched in years. Locals say the swamp keeps trying to erase it. Rangers say the swamp keeps trying to correct it. The earliest reports came in the late 1940s when fishermen returning from the canal found the entrance blocked by fallen trees arranged too neatly to be storm debris. The trunks were aligned diagonally across the water, not broken, not scattered, but placed, as if the swamp had reassembled itself during the night. When crews cleared the channel, the trees returned a week later. In 1972, a forestry survey team used chain gauges to measure the canal's width along its entire length. They recorded clear, straight edges. But when the team returned the next morning to verify a measurement, the banks had shifted inward by more than 6 feet. The mud slope curving gently as if molded by pressure. Trees on the bank leaned at odd angles, their roots exposed, as though the earth beneath them had moved sideways. The survey team blamed erosion, but erosion doesn't move in perfect symmetry. In 2001, a small houseboat tried cutting through the canal and hit something solid beneath the surface, a long ridge of compacted peat that hadn't been there the week before. When wildlife officers returned to mark it for removal, the ridge was gone. Sonar showed a flat bottom. Within 24 hours, the ridge reappeared 100 yards south, perfectly bisecting the waterway. Marine biologists reviewing sonar footage noticed something strange. The peat ridge didn't look natural. It had a gentle arc to it, a curve, like a rib. Then came the phenomenon that changed the canal's reputation forever. In 2014, during an unusually low water season, an airboat operator noticed a logjam forming along the eastern bank in an oddly geometric pattern. When he slowed to inspect it, the water level dropped suddenly, not by storm, not by tide, but as if the canal were tilting, shifting its basin. The water slid west, revealing stones, roots, and a perfectly straight trench carved into the mud beneath the canal floor. A trench that wasn't supposed to exist. A trench that matched the exact dimensions of the original 1920s logging cut. It was as if the swamp had quietly rebuilt the canal beneath the newer, altered channel, preserving the old one in perfect condition, hidden under layers of mud and water. Within days, the trench flooded again, and the canal's shape reverted. No engineering crew touched it. Geologists studying the basin's sediment movement attempted an explanation. Deep peat slabs sliding under pressure, forming and reforming water exits. But their own models failed to reproduce the sudden, coordinated movements recorded on sonar. Something was guiding the shape. In 2020, a group of duck hunters caught something on video. A low, deep vibration rolling through the canal, pushing ripples along the banks in a synchronized pattern. The vibration lasted 12 seconds, then stopped abruptly. When the hunting party returned the next morning, the canal's entrance had shifted 30 yards to the south, carved fresh and clean, as if a dredging machine had passed through overnight. No machine was anywhere near the basin. Rangers now keep quiet logs on the canal, maps showing month-by-month changes. The logs reveal a disturbing pattern. The canal doesn't drift randomly. It moves in segments, adjusting in slow, deliberate realignments, as though tracing something beneath the swamp. A shape, a boundary, a path that existed long before the logging companies arrived. 3 weeks ago, a hydrologist monitoring water flow found something alarming in the data. The canal shifts were accelerating, and the new alignment points toward a section of the basin known for structural collapses, places where the ground doesn't sink, it caves inward.
Bear Bayou, Atchafalaya Basin, Louisiana.
Locals call it Bear Bayou, but old maps listed under half a dozen names. Some crossed out, some overwritten, some simply erased. Even satellite images can't agree on its outline. One year, it appears as a tight crescent of water. The next, it stretches like a tongue through the cypress. And sometimes, without storms or floods, its shape breaks entirely, splitting into pieces the way ice fractures on a lake. Except this is Louisiana, and Bear Bayou isn't ice. It's land that bends. The earliest records come from 1938, when trappers reported entire patches of forest floor sinking overnight. Not gradually, not from erosion, but suddenly, as if a giant hand pressed down from above. The next morning, the ground rose again, leaving trees tilted in odd, synchronized angles. A government surveyor wrote that the area behaves like a floating mat. But floating mats don't drop 12 feet in a single night. By the 1960s, hunters navigating the bayou noticed a stranger pattern. Places where the cypress knees leaned all in the same direction, as though pushed by a slow, consistent pressure. When they returned months later, the knees leaned a different way. Not snapped, not cracked, just reoriented, as if the soil beneath them had rotated. The phenomenon escalated in 1984 when a research team studying peat compaction installed metal stakes throughout the bayou. Within 2 weeks, 11 stakes disappeared completely. Not bent, not broken, gone, swallowed straight down, leaving only clean circular holes where the earth had closed behind them. Soil samples showed no collapse, no cavity, no burrow. The ground had folded, closed, erased the evidence. Then came the breathing event. In 2006, 2 oil and gas contractors driving the levee at dusk stopped when they saw something impossible. The bayou surface bulged upward, as if inflated from below. For a moment, water domed nearly a foot high, smooth, glassy, trembling, before sinking back into itself with a hiss like steam escaping. The men reported a sulfur smell. Hydrologists blamed methane pockets, but methane pockets don't align trees into perfect radial patterns, which is exactly what investigators found days later. 28 cypress trees, all leaning outward from a central point, like spokes around a wheel. Whatever rose beneath Bear Bayou didn't rise randomly. It rose at a precise center. In 2019, new LiDAR scans captured a more disturbing detail. The ground beneath Bear Bayou wasn't sinking or swelling in isolated patches. The entire area was flexing, bending in slow motion as if hinged on something deep below the sediment. The data showed long, curved depressions forming and smoothing out over months, like massive fingerprints pressed into the swamp. And then last year, rangers witnessed the most alarming shift yet. During a low water morning, they noticed the bayou's banks were wrong. Too symmetrical, too fresh, as though the land had been sliced and repositioned in the night. A 30-foot section of bank had rotated almost perfectly, 18 degrees clockwise. Trees along the edge leaned at identical angles, their roots embedded in soil that looked newly packed as if placed by machinery. Except there were no tracks, no dredging, no storms, no human activity within miles. As one ranger wrote privately, "It felt like someone rearranged the furniture."
6 stories. 6 reminders that the Atchafalaya Basin is not simply a swamp. It's a moving architecture of water, soil, and memory, rearranging itself in ways no map can keep up with. Leave a like if one of these stories stayed with you. Comment which mystery unsettled you the most. And remember, the Atchafalaya doesn't wait for you to understand it.